Hey guys, so today we are going to be importing a mesh from Maya or whatever 3D program you want to create something in 3ds Max, Maya, whatever. And we're going to import that into Unity and make a certain cloth texture as one of the meshes here. So I have this model set up where I want to make this a cloth texture, and you see I named it curtain, and it'd be very nice to name all of your things. It's going to be much easier for you if you name everything before you go into Unity because those names import in as well. So you see I have curtain here as the mesh that I want to be a cloth. I also have all of these rings here, which I've named ring 1, ring 2, ring 3, all the way through ring 12 over here, because there's 12 of them. It's simple enough. And then I have this thing up here called the circle bar. I don't know what to call that. Like the hanging bar. I don't know. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna export this as a FBX file so that we can bring it into Unity very quickly and very simply. And then we're going to then create an interactive cloth, make this curtain an interactive cloth, which will then be able to interact with other objects in the scene, and you can add windage to it so that it'll just be flowing in the breeze or whatever. So let's start by taking your mesh, and we can select everything. You don't really need to because we have uh, export all here. Unless you have other things in your scene that you don't want to export, um, you can use export all. I'll use export selection just for right now. And there are a couple things you want to look at. If you have animation on it, you're going to want to have that clicked, but I don't have any animation on mine, so I'm actually going to unclick that. Um, it's whatever if you have animation. You don't need animation on this in order to make it an interactive cloth. So you don't have to have end cloth on anything here. So and it doesn't really work with end cloth either. So just keep it a mesh, and we'll make it a interactive cloth that you can play around with in Unity. So you just want to check that out, and then I think that's it. I'm exporting as an SPX 12. This thing here with version, sometimes 2014 and 2013 can get a little buggy. I've heard. So I've heard that the thing, if in doubt, use 2012. So I'm using FBX 2012 so that I don't ever have any doubt. And I'm just gonna export this. Let's name it. I'm gonna say curtain cloth, if I could spell correctly, curtain cloth. So just export it. Make sure it's an FBX down here. If you don't have that, it's going to be I'll show you real quick. I'm going to export it. If you don't have the ability to do the exporting, um, where is it? It's in one of these editors. I'm sorry. I'm doing weird things. Plugin Manager. If you go to Plugin Manager here, you go down and somewhere over here you'll have FBX Maya. So if it usually has loaded or auto load, it should have auto load already checked. And if auto load is checked, then loaded will be checked. But if you don't see FBX in your export settings, then just come down here, make sure that auto load and loaded are set. So excuse me. Um, so we're all set. So we can just go ahead, and that was really quick. The only tough part would be getting your mesh created. So let's go ahead and get into Unity. I have a new scene here. So actually, I should probably create a scene file, new scene. Great. Okay, new scene. So you just want to go in here. You want to right click in your assets. You might have a different view set, but just go to your assets area and you want to import a new asset. And when you import the new asset, you want to just choose whatever you're using. So I'm using curtain cloth, and you'll import it. And it'll take like 0 seconds whatsoever. So here it is. Here's my curtain cloth, and here are all the different parts of um, the mesh that was in my scene. So you have curtain, you have all these rings, and then you have the circle bar right there. So all you have to do is, all you want to do is bring it in. Well, actually, first, before you do that, go over to model. Make sure you check this model out because the scale factor is something you'll need to check out. You usually it'll for me it's always importing as 0.01. No matter what I do, it's importing as 0.01. I haven't really looked into changing that, but make sure that when you get it in, go to model over here on the right hand side and make sure it's set to 1 because otherwise it's going to be really small when you bring it into the screen, and the really small is no good. It's if something is so small, when you apply the interactive cloth to it and you add windage or whatever, you won't see any movement. It'll for some reason it just doesn't do anything. So just make sure this is set to 1 before you bring it in. So let's set that to 1 and make sure you hit apply. And if you don't hit apply and you go over to something, there'll be a pop-up window here that says, do you want to apply the settings? And you'll just click apply. So we're all set there. We want to bring this cloth in, or this mesh in. So what the heck? What the heck? Oh, there we go. I brought it in. It imported upside down. Maybe my viewport was just upside down. See, over here is my kind of the view cube. I was just upside down like this, and you don't want to do that. So I don't know why that was. I just created a new scene. Anyway, so you have all these things here, and before we do anything else, let's go in and let's make sure we create um, all these rings. Let's give them all a mesh collider. So you'll go into add component over here. Well, here you just have to click on. I mean, you have all of this. You just have to click on the ring, go to add component over here, or you could right click, I believe somewhere. Oh, maybe not. Just add component. Sorry. Go to physics, and you want to go to a mesh collider. Maybe something else is going to work. Maybe if it's a block boxy, if it's a block box, use a box sphere collider. If it's a sphere capsule, whatever. Capsule's more for characters, I believe. But mesh collider is what I use. So you just want to make sure you add mesh collider to every single one of these things. It might be tedious, but I mean it's like 4 clicks. I mean 1, 2, 3, 4. I mean it's really simple. Um, and it's something that you need to do in order for the. Well, I believe it's something you need to do before the interactive cloth to work. Honestly, this is I'm really new to this interactive cloth, um, but it hasn't not worked when I've done this, so may as well just do it and uh, better be safe than sorry. I don't know why it's jutting out at me like that. It's being crazy. Okay, I was gonna say anyway. Um, but these colliders are going to play a big part in. Oh darn it! These colliders are going to play a big part in the interactive cloth session, and because in order for oh okay we're already done. In order for this to become an interactive cloth and stay where it is relative to all of this stuff, you need to apply attachments, and these rings are going to be your attachments. Um, so let's go into making this an interactive cloth. Now, the first thing you'd probably think of is, why is it doing this craziness? Oh, what the heck? I'm really scared right now. I don't know why. Sorry. I'm sorry, I'm getting really distracted. Anyway, the first thing you probably think you want to do is you want to go in here, go to add component, and go to physics and add an interactive cloth. And the thing with that is that it I'm having a seizure or something. Um, gosh dang it. Anyway, the thing with that is that it doesn't make it an interactive cloth. Let's go ahead and go to game object. Or no, let's grab our camera, go to game object, and align it with view. Um, that just makes it so that whatever you're looking at, that's what the object sees, or whatever the object moves that you're looking at, like the main camera or the current cloth or whatever. But the thing you might think to do is add an interactive cloth here. And whenever I add an interactive cloth or create an interactive cloth, I want to make sure it's working. So what I do is I go into these acceleration points. And what these do is this is kind of like wind. So if you add 5, 5, 5, it'll add a windage kind of a breeze to the interactive cloth, and it'll make it move as if there are external forces that are pushing it towards a certain direction. And in this case, it would be 5 in the X, 5 in the Y, 5 in the Z, and it's kind of like miles per hour or something. It's a speed variable, um, not like a distance variable or a force variable. Um, it's more of a force variable. So what I do is I always go in there and I just crank those up to see if it works, and then I go to play. And when you play it, you can see that nothing is happening. You can go into the scene view and see that nothing is happening. And why you might be like, why is that? Why I added an interactive cloth? You might go in here. You might be like, oh, maybe I have to add a cloth, a skin cloth, or a cloth renderer. And let me just tell you right now, you don't. It's weird. I haven't found many tutorials on this. I just played around with it for a little bit and found this out. You cannot make this mesh an interactive cloth. Yeah, it sounds really weird, but you just can't. So what you have to do, it's kind of counterintuitive in my opinion, is you have to go up to game object, you have to create other, and when you go into create other, you see cloth down here. So you want to create a cloth. But the weird thing is you get this plane that's and yeah, you get this plane with a shader that makes it so that backspace culling is on, which means that you're not going to see the back here. Um, it is still there as proof here, proof right here. It is still there. It's just that the shader has this script that makes it so that back face culling is on and that you can see right through it. Now, I have no idea how scripting shaders works, so this is not something I'm going to tamper with. However, you'll be able to see it just fine because what I have here is I have a three-dimensional. Actually, let me just open up my thing here. I used a plane and I extruded it and I made a three-dimensional object here. And this also works with a plane. It also works with three-dimensional objects. So no matter what, you'll be fine. Uh, but anyway, I have a three-dimensional object here, and what's going to happen is this is going to wrap around that. So you might think, hey, let's try and wrap this around, but there's no vert controls or anything in Unity. It's very simple. What you have to do is you go in here, um, and you see all this stuff in interactive cloth. And because it's a cloth you created, you already have all this interactive cloth applied to it. So where you go is you go down to mesh here. And right now it's set at plane, and that's just going to give you this plane that you see right here. But what you want to do is you want to click that little arrow thingy here, and you want to find your the mesh that you want to use. And see, this is why the naming comes in very handy, because there's all these normal things down here. You might have a bunch of other stuff in the scene, but if you name them all correctly, you can just go in and find what you want to name, or what you want to make an interactive cloth, find its name, which is curtain, and you can make a curtain. Now, it makes it really, really big. I don't know why. However, I don't know. I'm just going to scale it down to um, the size of the other curtain. I don't know why it's so small. I'm sorry. I don't know what's going on. But I'm just going to size it down to the curtain. Oh my goodness! What is going on with my computer right now? Sorry. I'm sorry if I'm giving you like brain aneurysms because of this, but um, you just want to line it up with your mesh here, kind of make it about the same size, and you can just go ahead, go in here, grab your curtain, and actually delete it. You can go ahead and delete the curtain. It's now unnecessary to have. So now you have this thing right here, and I am actually just going to create a material so that I can show you, so that it doesn't look so stupid. I'm just gonna create a material. We'll name it cloth right now, and I'm just gonna make it red, and we can go ahead and add that. Oh no, we can go ahead and add that there. Now I don't know why it's shaded like that. Honestly, I have no idea. But that's not something I'm here to show you. And oh my goodness, I'm going crazy with all of this stuff. Why is that happening? I'm getting very distracted. Stop getting distracted myself. Anyway, so you've made this interactive cloth, and one thing you want to make sure that your interactive cloth is clipping through the objects that you want to use as your attachments, which are these rings. And as you can see, that it is clearly cutting through. So that's something you need to make sure happens. So what you need to do now is kind of let's use the attached colliders. So when you go to attached colliders, you see size here and it's 0, and you might be asking yourself, what the heck is size talking about? Well, size is talking about how many colliders do you have. And for me, if you look at all these rings, I have 12 rings. So you're going to name that size 12, at least in my case. Maybe you have 2, maybe you have 1. Mine is 12. So all of these elements pop up, and you have these colliders here that you're just like, easy, make the collider. So you can just go collider, and because you have this interactive cloth clipping through these things, all of these rings pop up as colliders that are able to be selected. So you can just go down the line. Tedious, I know, but super simple. Just go down the line and say, these are the colliders I want. So let's just do that real quick. I'm gonna go quiet because I don't really have anything to say while I do this. So let's just get these set up. All right, and we're finishing up here real quick. Got the last one to do, ring 12. Okay, so what that does is it makes it so that this interactive cloth will be dependent on all of these colliders and these pieces of mesh up here, and it's, think of it as kind of gluing it to these colliders. So now let's go in and we'll make sure it's working. So how do we do that again? Well, I just make sure it's working by adding some things there, and let's make that. Oh my goodness! Oh my goodness! Let's make this camera come back to my position, align it with view, and we'll play. And now you can see we have some cloth going, and of course my acceleration is a little bit too high, and it's going wonky. And you see all of this stuff right here. You see all this really weird shading. That's just because I have a very low poly mesh, and it's really something that you should take into account before bringing it in. That cloth is going to need a little bit more a little bit more polys just to make it look smoother when it's being interacted with. And so yeah, it's working. You can see it's working. Um, you you might want to bump down the acceleration a bit and just, but that was just for a little test. I mean, you can just go in and say, hey, let's do that little random acceleration. Don't really know what it does yet. I haven't looked into it too much, but um, it just makes it. I know it makes it a little bit more believable because random acceleration does some weird stuff. And as you can see here, yeah, the other things you would just want to make sure you're looking at is bending stiffness, which is going to make it so that the higher you're bending, um, the the harder it is for the verts to be moved around when it's a cloth. Because I just added it to one and it made it a pretty stiff surface. Maybe it's kind of like a if you were sitting down in a big lazy boy chair that had like a tight cloth around it, that if you had cloth on that you might want to make that one, just because um, then things aren't it's not pushing as much, so it's a heavier material. But if you put it back down to zero, then you have um, a lot more vert movement here. As you can see, we'll just look at this view right here. You have all these verts being pushed in a lot, but then if you bump it up to one here, um, they're not moving as much. They're much stiffer with their movement. But for lighter materials, you want to go down close to zero, maybe zero point 0.5. Um, Stretching stiffness. That's gonna that's gonna um, that's gonna say how much distance the verts will be able to move away from each other, depending on the cloth interaction. You got damping, which I technically don't know what it does, so we'll skip that for a second. Thickness, I believe that's how thick you believe the. Excuse me. I believe that's how thick you believe. Oh my goodness, thick you think the material would be. Um, so I believe if you use that with a stronger bending stiffness, um, it would become a very thick, uh, a very thick material. It would look like a very thick material. So as you can see, I bumped that up from zero point 0.2 to 1, and it became a lot like changing the bending stiffness to 1. You want to always you usually want to use self collision, just because when you do, it'll when a vert runs into another um, when a vert runs into another plane or vert, um, it won't pass through it. It'll bump into it, which will make it a lot nicer and more believable, um, with all that jazz. Um, what else do we got here? Friction, that's pretty self-explanatory. Density is pretty self-explanatory. Tearing, I haven't looked too much into tearing. There's a great tutorial on YouTube. Um, if you just look up uh, Unity cloth, it should be like one of the first two and it talks about what these tear factors and whatever that stuff is. It talks about how that works a lot better. But that's pretty much a quick lowdown on cloth. It's something that you have to create a cloth and then bind it to a certain mesh, because when you use just the mesh itself and add an interactive cloth to it, it doesn't work. So there you guys go. I hope you enjoyed, and hope this was very helpful for you. And yeah, anyway, take it easy, and I'll be back with some more, hopefully. See you later.